Right. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn webinar, Bank Reconciliations in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015 and 2016, brought to you by ArcherPoint. If you're responsible for your company's bank reconciliations, today's Lunch and Learn is a great learning opportunity for you. Whether you're using NAV 2015 or 2016, or if your company has an upgrade in its future, you need to know some important facts about bank reconciliations in both NAV versions. Our presenter today is Trish Mays, a client service representative here at ArcherPoint. Trish is a veteran in the NAV world, having managed new NAV implementations and providing functional support for Navision Financials version 2.6 to the present release since 2004. Since 1999, actually, she's been managing new implementation projects for clients in a variety of industries, as well as projects for existing clients, which included project management, solutions analysis, testing, and post-go-live support. In less than 1 hour today, Trish will introduce you to the two methods for doing bank reconciliations in NAV 2015 and 2016, as well as their differences. She'll also discuss which method will be best for you based on your settings and other variables. We will offer a Q&A at the end of Trish's presentation. So again, please either type your questions in the questions pane of your GoToWebinar console or use the raise your hand option during Q&A to ask your question verbally. I will announce the person asking the question and unmute your line at that time. Without further delay, Trish, over to you.
Thanks, Suzanne. All right, so let's go over the agenda of what we're going to cover during this hour today. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to take a high-level overview of the bank reconciliation options that were introduced in NAV 2015 and then are obviously still available in NAV 2016. Beginning in NAV 2015, we actually were presented with two different options on how we would like to process our bank reconciliations. It's important to understand how those work so you can make an informed decision for your company or entity on which of the options you would like to use. And that's what really the goal of today is, to give you that information to make that decision. All right, so we'll actually go through a demonstration of both of the available options. I'll highlight the differences between both. And then again, hopefully you'll take away the information you need to decide which approach you would like to use. All right, so let's take a look at just our high-level overview before we dive into the actual demonstration. All right, so the two options that are available to us for processing bank reconciliations beginning in NAV 2015 are really termed, and this is how you will see them termed in the literature that you'll find online from Microsoft as well. We have our bank reconciliation with Automatch, all right, and that's really our worldwide functionality, all right. Worldwide meaning that this is the base functionality available in Dynamics NAV regardless of the country or localization that your database is geared towards, all right. Now, if you're working in a North American localized database, which I'm assuming most of us here today are, we actually have a second option. All right, and our second option is the bank reconciliation functionality that is geared towards North American practices, and it's actually what, if you've been working in a North American database for some time, it's what you are used to from previous versions, that being versions prior to NAV 2015, right, 2013, 2009, and so on. All right, so let's take a look at what I feel are kind of the pros and the cons between the two. All right, and we'll start with our bank reconciliation with Automatch, again, part of the worldwide functionality. All right, part of the benefits that come along with selecting this approach to your bank reconciliation is that we are able to import bank statement data from your bank. All right, we'll take a look at some of the options you have surrounding that here in just a moment when we do the demonstration, but that is a pretty strong benefit, all right, and you can directly import data from your bank, all right. Another benefit of using the bank reconciliation with Automatch is it has what they call automatic matching, or what those of us in North America would think of as clearing transactions on our bank reconciliation, all right. We'll actually see that during the demonstration that there is some logic included that once you import bank statement data, it will actually go through and automatically match or clear that to your bank ledger entry records for that period. All right. So still time saving, right? Obviously a benefit. All right, some of the drawbacks to our worldwide or bank reconciliation with Automatch option. Unfortunately, there is no report for this reconciliation option that will list outstanding checks or deposits for the period. And for those of us in North America, that's a pretty strong con, right? It's something we typically require both internally as well as auditing, for example. That is usually something that the auditors will ask for. So we'll see when we do our demonstration. Unfortunately, there is no report for this that displays that information. And we'll see that as compared to the North American option, adjustments are click intensive, all right? Adjustments being anything that you need to post related to your reconciliation that did not import from your bank statement. Perhaps your particular bank's import format does not include interest entries, all right? Anything that you actually have to manually add, compared to the North American reconciliation, it's somewhat click intensive. All right. Now, if we think about the North American approach, something that we're more used to if you've been working in a North American database, the pros are we do have a report geared very specifically towards North American requirements that shows outstanding checks and deposits, right? And our adjustment process for those things that we have not yet posted to our bank ledger but are on our statement, it's much quicker and more flexible in the North American approach. All right, but the cons, and unfortunately this is true, Microsoft did not give us the option to import bank statement data into our North American bank reconciliation. All right, so we'll see that we are still using our suggest lines function when we do our demonstration here in just a moment. And there's no automatic matching of our bank ledger records, right? We must manually clear those records that have cleared the bank in the period. All right. So here's a very high-level overview, and we'll see each of these points demonstrated when we go into the actual product. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to bring up Dynamics NAV. This is actually NAV 2016. And we're just working in the sample Cronus database. I've set up some data that we can use today to process some bank reconciliations. All right, so the first thing I would like to talk about before we dive into the actual bank reconciliation is how do you choose within Dynamics NAV which approach will be used in your database. And it actually is all controlled by one single field, all right? And that field is located in our General Ledger Setup window. So I'm going to use my search bar or box, and I'm going to look up General Ledger Setup. All right, so here's our General Ledger Setup window. The one field that controls which of the two approaches that will be used in your database is this Bank Reconciliation with Automatch field. All right. If this field is checked, you will be using the worldwide approach. All right. The Bank Reconciliation with Automatch approach. If this field is not selected, you will be using the North American reconciliation functionality. All right, that's very important. I'm going to say it one more time. If this field is checked, you will be using the worldwide approach. If this field is not checked, you will be using the North American functionality. All right, so for our first demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and leave this field selected. So our first reconciliation that we perform will be using the worldwide functionality. Now, I'll pass this along. I know that some of you may be considering upgrades. You may have just recently upgraded. You may be in the midst of a brand new implementation or re-implementation. Okay, according to the Microsoft literature, when you install a new database, so something you would be doing as part of a new implementation, perhaps a re-implementation, according to them, a new database will have this field checked. All right, so a new database will by default have this field checked, meaning it will use the worldwide functionality. According to the literature, if you upgrade a North American database, this field will not get checked. All right, so if you are upgrading perhaps from, let's say, NAV 2009, right, to NAV 2016, a North American database, according to them, the upgrade process will not check this field. But you're going to see as we go through this, with the vast difference between the two approaches, if I were upgrading to NAV 2015 or 16, I would sure go check this. Make sure you look at this field and make sure that after you've gone through today's presentation and selected an approach, make sure this field is populated to support that. All right, so bank reconciliation with Automatch, general ledger setup. All right, I'll leave it checked for right now. Our first demonstration will be the worldwide functionality. Now, as part of that worldwide functionality, we saw just a moment ago that that includes the ability to import data from your bank. All right, I want to take a quick look at the bank account card just to show you a few of the fields that are related to that. For today's demonstration, we're going to be using this ABC bank card, which I set up specifically for today. And I'm going to go ahead and view this bank account card. All right, if we scroll down here just a little bit, there we go. You can see on our transfer tab that we have a labeled bank statement import format. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just click on the drop down arrow so you can see what the selections are here. All right, now the test bank import format is one that I have set up specifically for today. All right, and that is part of the data exchange functionality. That's where you can set up these import formats. Now typically you will have available to you a selection of SEPA, the second record that we see in the drop down. That is really the European Union based format. All right, and then you will have the bank data conversion service option. Those of us in the US, typically I believe you would be making that selection. All right, and if you make that bank data conversion service selection, now there is a sign-up process that revolves around this. If you would like additional information on that, please let us know. But in brief, once you sign up for the bank data conversion service, if you see here, I'll click on this drop-down for the bank name data conversion. Here's a sample of the banks that are currently participating with the bank data conversion service. So these are some of the banks that you should be able to import data from. All right, I'll just kind of briefly scroll down. You can see that the list is a decently long list here. All right, but since I did not have a file for today's demonstration from any of our banks in this listing, I went ahead and set up my own very simplistic data import format using the data exchange framework. All right. So I just wanted to point out that when we go to import data into our worldwide version, be aware that it's looking at your bank account card in order to know what the format of the file is that will be imported. All right, let's dive right in. I'm going to start a bank reconciliation. So I'll use my search to look up my bank account reconciliations. All right, now at this point, the page or window that I'm seeing is the same no matter what selection I have made in my bank reconciliation with Automatch field. All right. When I select New to begin a new reconciliation, all right, I'm asked to select a bank to reconcile. This field or page is, this page is still the same regardless of the selection you've made. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and use ABC Bank for today. This is where it gets different. All right, because in my general ledger setup window I've selected the bank reconciliation with Automatch field, the page or window that I'm being displayed here is very different. All right, I'm looking at the worldwide functionality right now. I'm going to go ahead and minimize the main nav window in the background here, just so it's a little less busy. All right, so we can see that up at in the general tab of our worldwide window, it's populated the bank account we selected. It's populated the statement number that comes directly from the bank account card. It maintains what the last statement number was, so it can give you the new one. We do have to enter a statement date. And for our worldwide bank reconciliation, I'm going to go ahead and do a June 30 bank reconciliation. It will pull forward what your balance last statement was. That is also maintained on the bank account card, what the balance was on your last reconciled statement. And then statement ending balance, this is where it wants you to take a look at either your paper reconciliation or what you've looked up online on your banking portal. What is the ending balance on the statement for this period? And I'll go ahead and type that in right now. $549,825.89. All right, now the body of our window here is really divided into two separate panes. All right, on the right-hand side we have our bank account ledger entries. This is pulling directly from your bank account ledger. It's what you've posted for ABC Bank to date. Now you'll notice that even though I have entered a statement date of June 30th, 2017, this particular company has transactions already posted in periods past this, right? We see some July postings. That's a little different for us. That's different than what the North American functionality does. What you can do, and I suggest you do this, particularly since you may not be able to reconcile exactly on the last day of a period, right? You can always set filters in this window. So if I go ahead and set a filter here, I'm going to select Add Filter. And for my posting date, I'm just going to say only go through my statement ending date. It just makes the screen cleaner, right? Now I know that I'm only working with those bank ledger entries that go through my actual period I'm reconciling. All right, the left-hand side of our window is for our bank statement lines. All right. Now again, one of the benefits of this approach is that you can import the data from your bank. All right. So if you do have a file you can import from your bank, we can use our import bank statement action right up here on our ribbon to import that file. Now be aware, if for some reason you select this approach but are not able to import a file from your bank, we can manually populate this window using the Suggest Lines feature. I'll show our Suggest Lines feature when we do our second reconciliation here in a moment for the North American functionality. All right, so for today, for this statement, we're going to use our import bank statement. All right, so I go ahead and select that action. I'll browse to my file. All right, and it has imported my statement data from my bank. All right, again, it looked back at the selections on that bank account card in order to interpret that file and import the data. All right, so now really our goal is to apply what they term in the worldwide functionality apply, what we think of usually in the North American circle as clear, right? We have to basically match these records. All right, and you have two choices on how to match them. We can match automatically. There is a logic included that goes through the records that you imported from the bank and tries to automatically match them to what you have posted to your bank account ledger. All right. We can also manually match. So if for some reason the system wasn't able to determine a match, you can go through and match them manually. All right. So let's try our match automatically, and let's see how close NAV can get to matching or applying our bank account ledger entries to our data imported from our banks. All right, so I'm going to select Match Automatically, and it's going to ask me a question. It would like me to enter my transaction date tolerance in days. All right. What this means is this. It is asking, based on the transaction date that came in from my bank data and the posting date of the records from my bank, or from my bank account ledger, right? So these are the posting dates we selected in NAV when processing these transactions. What's the tolerance? What should be considered as trying to apply them? All right. I'm going to go ahead just for today's demonstration and enter 5 days, which means if those dates are not within 5 days of one another, do not automatically apply or match them. Now, in the real world, I highly doubt you would select 5 days. I'm doing it to make a point here, all right? And this is really where I think you'll get to a comfort point if you choose the worldwide functionality as to what number of days works for your organization. For example, if I am reconciling monthly, I might choose to put 40 days in here, only because I may have some outstanding checks that are clearing and I would like it to try an auto match. If I do daily reconciliations, I might only want to put 3 days in here, right? It really depends on the period that you're reconciling and really the clear rate for your records, right? If you have a lot of 1099 vendors that you send $3.82 checks to here and there that they don't cash for 8 months, you may put a very different number in here than someone that processes everything via wire and ACH that tends to clear immediately, right? All right, but for our demonstration today, I'm going to enter 5 days as my tolerance. And when I click OK, you're going to see that the system's going to compare the 2 records on either side and try and click this applied or checkmark this applied field for those that match one another. All right, it told me that it was able to match all 6 lines that were imported from my bank. All right, so let's take a look at what happened. All right, so on the bank account ledger entry side, it has selected the applied field for those it felt it was able to match. And then on both sides of the window, which is kind of nice, it has changed the font for most of the fields to green, meaning that they have been matched. All right, so let's take a look at what happened here when it matched. We can see that, you know, the document number is on both sides. I can see that check number 1014 from my bank account data, it obviously went through the bank, but if I look over on my bank account ledger entries, 1014 is not selected, right? Everything else kind of looks fairly legitimate to me, right? If I kind of compare the date and the document number and the amount as to what was matched, until I get down to check number 1017, right, or 1018. I posted check number 1018 in my NAV database, but I really don't see 1018 clearing my bank on the left-hand side of the window. Be aware that while the automatic matching is great, sometimes, particularly with recurring payments of the same amount, depending on the number of tolerance days you put in, it may sometimes match the wrong check number because the amount is the same, right? Now, if we look here, the reason that it could not match check number 1014 from my bank data to check number 1014 in my ledger is because my ledger, this transaction was posted on May 31st, right? It cleared the bank over here on the left-hand side on June 30th. That was outside of my 5-day tolerance that I entered for matching. So it did what it thought was the next best thing. It matched this payment of the same amount for check number 1018 that did fall within that payment tolerance of 5 days, right? Because June 30th and June 30th. So even though the automatic matching is there, in my testing, it tends to get things right 99% of the time. Just be aware that you do still have to double check it, all right? And in this case, I need to unmatch check number 1018 and rematch it to number 1014, all right? So let me show you how you can do that. You just simply need to put your cursor on each of the records that you want to unmatch, all right? So I've highlighted both records on either side. Right, and you notice on my ribbon I have the option to remove match. All right, once I've done that, the check mark is removed from my applied column, and you'll see that the font is no longer green. These records are no longer matched. Now, we're working with a very small data set here today, right? Obviously, in actual reconciliations, you may be dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of lines here. They do give us some automatic filters to make working with a large number of records a little easier in this window. All right, so if I go to my Actions tab, you notice that I do have an option to show non-matched. So I can very quickly, if I select Show Non-Matched, filter my windows down to only those records that the automatic matching did not apply, right? As well as those that I may have also manually unapplied. So taking a look at my non-match transactions, I can see that from my bank data on the left side, I have check number 1014 for $4,486.30. And posted to my bank account ledger on the right-hand side, I have that same check number in the same amount. So it makes sense to me that those should be matched, right? This is a form of a recurring payment, so we can see that we tend to make it on the last day of every month. So it won't match check number 1018, obviously. We'll want to match it to 1014. All right, so we can manually match records as well. Again, all we need to do is just highlight the two records that we want to apply to one another. And up on my ribbon, I have a Match Manually option. So I'll go ahead and manually match these records. And you'll notice that my filters automatically have now removed those records from my view because I've said they're matched, and I'm only looking at my non-matched records. All right, so that only leaves me as check number 1018 that was posted to Dynamics NAV. That did not clear my bank. It was not in my bank data that I imported. So that must be truly an outstanding check, right? Written on the last day of the month. They just didn't get it down to the bank on that day. All right, so up on my ribbon, I'm going to go ahead and go back to Show All. Now, the one thing about going back to Show All is it will remove any filter that you've set on your posting date in your bank account ledger entries. I'll just go ahead and quickly reset that. So again, I'm just going to set it through the end of my statement period. All right, and this looks fairly legitimate to me, right? Everything is matched that came in from my bank on the left-hand side. And the only non-matched record that I really have is, and I think I probably forgot the two dots in front of my filter here. The only thing that I have that is not matched is a true outstanding check, number 1018. All right, when you are using the worldwide reconciliation, what this particular approach is comparing to determine if you are reconciled is the statement ending balance that you manually enter, in my case 549,825.89. It is comparing it to this total balance field down at the bottom of the window, all right, 549,725.89. If I look at my test report for this reconciliation, again, this is the worldwide functionality. We'll go ahead and preview. All right, we can see here that I do have a warning, and I'll go ahead and make this a little larger so it's a little easier to see. Well, if it'll let me, let's do it this way. Well, it's going to be a little picky here, so unfortunately I can't make it any larger. But we can see that we have a warning here telling me that my statement ending balance is not equal to the total balance. All right, we'll come back and look at this report again here in just a moment. So I can see that I have a $100 difference between my ending balance and my total balance, right? So if I take a look at my statement, right, whether it's on my online banking portal, a paper statement that came in the mail, whatever it may be, I'm going to go ahead and say that there's a $100 interest entry that for some reason just wasn't included in my file from the bank, so I have to add it manually. All right, you can add adjustments directly into this window. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just go down into my next blank line on my bank statement lines, right, because this is something that has not yet been posted to my bank account ledger. It is something I'm seeing on my statement that I haven't yet posted to Dynamics NAV yet. All right, and I can manually enter a line here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this was posted to the bank on June 30th, the last day of our period. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give it a description of interest earned, and we earned $100 in interest in this period. All right, so now we have an entry in our bank statement lines that has no associated bank account ledger to be applied to. So that's our next step. We actually have to take this entry that we put in for the interest earned and create a bank account ledger entry for that. This process is very different than what we'll see in the North American database or North American functionality. So once I've entered my manual adjustment, if I go up to my ribbon, I have an action to transfer to the general journal, and that's actually what I need to do here, because by transferring this record to the general journal and posting it, it will actually establish the bank account ledger entry. All right, so I've highlighted my record here. I'm going to go ahead and select transfer to the general journal. It is asking me which of my general journal templates and then which of the batches within that template I would like to transfer this record to, and I will use my general template in my default batch. If you have multiple batches set up, which most people do, you can certainly select any of the other batches that are available by clicking the drop-down. But I'll go ahead and use my default batch, and I'll click OK. All right. one of the nice things is it does automatically open the batch that you selected. And we can see here that we have most of the fields have been populated on the record that was created. The posting date, my description, right, the amount, the balance account type and number for the bank account that I'm reconciling. Really, the only thing I need to do here is edit the description if I need to, potentially add any dimension values if I need to, and then obviously select an account number to post to. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and post this particular line to my interest on bank balances GL account. All right, and then I'll just double check everything looks good, and we'll go ahead and post this guy. And this is just our regular general journal, right? Same general journal you would get to off the menu. All right, my journal line was successfully posted. I'll close out of my general journal. And we can see here that immediately on our bank account ledger entry, in our bank account reconciliation window, that posting is displayed. So now we can match, right, or apply these two records. So I'll go ahead and highlight this record. I'll highlight my interest earned, and then I'm going to match manually. All right, and the good news is once I do that, my statement ending balance of $549,825.89 matches my total balance. And if I go back to my test report, my warning is gone, right? I'm now, as far as this worldwide method is concerned, in balance. The main thing that I would point out about this approach is this report, right? And we looked at this as one of the cons in our overview. This is the report you get for the worldwide functionality, all right? All it does is give you the bank account number, the statement date, the balance from the last statement, and what you've entered as your new statement ending balance, and it just simply shows the bank entries that have been cleared, and that's it. You don't get a listing of outstanding checks, you don't get a listing of outstanding deposits, and because this reconciliation approach really is not closely tied to the GL, you notice that it is not comparing anything from your general ledger account balance for cash for this account. There's no reconciliation that we're used to seeing at the top comparing the statement ending balance to the general ledger cash account balance, right? This is what you get. Right? It may work for some, just very, very, very different than what we're used to in the North American localization. All right, the other thing that I'll point out is in order to post this reconciliation, you actually don't even have to be in balance as far as it's concerned. Your statement ending balance, even though that is what is being compared to the total balance to remove the warning from that test report, you can actually post this reconciliation even when they do not match. All right. Let's go ahead. We are in balance as far as this approach is concerned. Let's go ahead and post this reconciliation. I'll click yes. All right, let's bring back up our NAV window. All right, and our bank account reconciliation listing is now empty because we've posted this reconciliation, right? It's no longer an active in-process reconciliation. Now, we can always go back and see our posted reconciliations, no matter which method we use, all right? So I'm going to go back to my bank account card for ABC Bank, and if I go to my Navigate tab on my ribbon, you notice that we have two options here. We have a Statements option, and we have a Posted Reconciliations option. If you are using the worldwide approach, the approach that we just saw, your posted reconciliations will be available under the Statements. All right? So I'm going to go ahead and select Statements. I've selected ABC Bank in my listing. And we can see that this June 30th statement that we just completed is in our listing. All right? We can always choose to view this again. All right? The window is a little different. It's not split anymore. It's just simply listing the transactions that were that flowed through the reconciliation. One of the things that is missing here, as far as most users are concerned, is there is no print button. All right? There's no way to, the only way to print this is to actually send the screen to either like a PDF printer. You can send it to Word or Excel, right? I'll go ahead and print it to PDF just so we can see what it looks like. All right. So here's what you get basically, right? For if you have to go back to a previous reconciliation when you use the worldwide approach, let's say the auditors are in, they ask you to print off your reconciliations for the past 12 months, for example. This is what you would have available to hand to them out of the box. Okay. Again, no listing of outstanding checks or deposits in transit for the period. All right. So let's take a look at what our second choice is for processing bank account reconciliations. All right, and in order to switch to the North American approach, I have to go back to my General Ledger Setup window, and I have to remove my check mark from the bank reconciliation with Automatch feature. All right, when this field is not checked, I will now be using the North American approach for bank reconciliation. One important thing that myself and my colleagues on our support desk have found is that you do not want to remove that check mark if you have a reconciliation in process. It requires intervention to correct the outcome of that action, all right? It actually it makes the reconciliation, no matter which approach you were taking at the time that you changed the setting in the bank reconciliation with Automatch feature, it's basically stuck. It gets the reconciliation into a status where you really can't work with it any longer, right? So while you can change this at any time, please do not do it if you have a reconciliation in process. All right, so we'll leave this blank, which means, again, we'll use our North American functionality. And now we're going to go reconcile this exact same bank for the month of July. All right, so just to make life a little easier here, I'm going to change my work date. And I will use my search field to go to my bank account reconciliations. All right, and now we're doing the same thing we did previously, just with the bank reconciliation with Automatch field not selected. So I'll select New. This window is still exactly the same, right? I still have to select the bank I'm going to reconcile. I'll click OK. Here's where it gets completely different. And I'll go ahead and minimize our background nav window to make it easier to see. All right, this window represents the North American functionality. Again, if you have worked with Dynamics NAV prior to NAV 2015, this should look very similar to you, right? It's essentially the same functionality. All right, so our bank account number is populated with ABC Bank. Our statement number populated, right? It knows that the next statement number is 16 based on the settings on the bank account card. My statement date has defaulted to July 31st. That is the period that I want to reconcile. And you notice that here, one of the main differences with the North American approach is that it is very closely tied to reconciling our bank account subledger, right, our bank account ledger entries, back to our general ledger, right? So just like it always has, if you've worked with NAV in the past, it's pulling this GL balance based on the bank account posting group assigned to my bank account card, right, which then points back to the balance sheet account for cash for this particular bank. All right, so the next step is to go ahead and input our balance on statement. Again, I'm just looking at the paper statement that came in the mail. I'm looking at my bank account portal, whatever it may be. And I'm going to go ahead and put in what the statement balance is on July 31st, 2017. Let's make sure I type that correctly, 359,161.54. All right. Now, if you choose to, all right, these fields are not required, but this cleared withholding checks per statement and the cleared increases to deposits per statement, these you will typically find on your printed bank statement, right? It's just the sum total of the increases and decreases to the bank account in the statement period. If you choose to enter those, they can be helpful just to as perhaps a proof of cash, or to make sure that you truly have cleared everything that you're expecting to clear, right? It's basically like a check total, but be aware it's not required. All right, so once we've filled in our balance on statement on our general tab, I'm going to go ahead and collapse my general tab temporarily so we have more screen room. Our next step is to populate our checks tab with the checks that are outstanding as of July 31st as far as NAV is concerned, right? If I collapse my checks tab, we also, in this process, will need to populate any deposits that were processed in the period, right, to potentially clear those. And then we may have to enter an adjustment for something that we've not yet posted to NAV that did go through the bank in the period. All right. Now the way that we do that, if I go to my Actions tab, is with Suggest Lines. Now remember, this option is available in the worldwide approach as well. If you cannot import bank account data when you're using the worldwide version, you can use this Suggest Lines as well. All right. What Suggest Lines does is it reads through the posted bank account ledger entries and check ledger entries in order to populate records to match and clear against what's physically on your statement. All right. So when you use Suggest Lines, all right, you have to make a choice in the record type to process. I really don't know anyone that chooses to only bring in checks or deposits individually. To save time, most people choose to bring in both types of records at the same time instead of having to run this process twice, but you do have that option. You do have a choice to replace existing lines. Since this is the first time I'm doing this for this reconciliation, I really don't need to, but be aware that if you check mark this, it's going to delete all of your records on the checks and deposits transfers tabs and replace them. So if you've spent 2.5 hours clearing records and you feel pretty good about it, you don't want to click replace existing lines or they will be wiped out and replaced. All right. Typically you use replace existing lines if you've been working on it for too long. It's just such a mess you can't figure out what you did wrong. You just want to start fresh, right? And then in the posting date, it's very important that you want to enter a filter of ... meaning an interval, right? And then your statement ending date. So we are reconciling through July 31st, 2017. It's always ... statement ending date, all right? All right, I'll click OK, and let's see what happens. All right, if I go ahead and expand my checks tab, we can see here that I now have, let's go ahead and make that small, I now have checks that have populated because I've run Suggest Lines. All right, so these are the checks that Dynamics NAV knows of that I processed in the period. Okay, same thing on my deposits and transfers tab. If I take a look at that, I do have a deposit that was processed on the 25th of July for this total amount. So now my next step is to look at my bank statement, whether it came in the mail or I'm looking online at my portal, and clear those records that I see on my statement. All right, so I'm going to start with my checks. Now I have two choices in the North American functionality on how I want to clear these records, all right? And really the goal is you have to have a check mark and cleared for every one of these records that physically cleared your bank in the period. My first choice is I can just go ahead and check mark things, all right? You can see I can just edit the field, click and check mark. All right, if I accidentally clear something I don't intend to, I can always click to remove the check mark. If you are dealing with a large number of records, you do have an option to clear groups of records at once, all right, and that is through the use of our Mark Lines action. What Mark Lines allows you to do, and I'll go ahead and click that action, is select the type of record you would like to clear in a batch. So I'm working with my checks, so I'm going to select to clear my checks in a batch. I'm going to make sure that this Mark Lines is cleared is selected, so it will put a check mark in the cleared column. And then it's important that you enter a filter so it knows which of the records should be cleared. Some people like to clear everything and then work from the opposite approach, just uncheck those that did not clear. Most of the time the users I work with prefer to look at their statement and see which document numbers cleared without interruption. So in my example, check number 1018 through 1022 cleared, right? 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So I can, in my document number, then enter that filter, right? And typically you'd be doing this multiple times. You'd look for, you know, sections of documents that cleared without interruption, and do this as many times as needed to clear those that actually cleared the bank. So I'll go ahead after entering this filter. I'll click OK. All right, and we can see that it has cleared everything within that filter. Now, one of the things I like to point out here is very deceptively there is a action on your ribbon marked as clear lines. You know, a reasonable person might think that has something to do with the cleared column in your reconciliation. Be aware that the clear lines action actually means delete. All right, so if you run clear lines, you're going to be deleting the records on your checks or deposits transfers tab depending on the filters that you've selected. So I know it's very confusing. It's been this way since the beginning of NAV time as far as I'm aware. Do not use clear lines in here unless you're trying to delete your lines. Mark lines is what actually marks your cleared column as checked. All right, so I'm going to say that everything except for 1022 actually cleared the bank. All right, 1022 is outstanding, written on the last day of the month, just didn't clear the bank as of the 31st. So I'll uncheck the cleared field. All right, let's look at our deposit transfers. Again, I could use the mark lines functionality to clear groups of these. I only had one deposit in the period. I'm going to look at my bank statement. It did clear, so I'll go ahead and mark it as cleared. All right, so I'll go ahead. I'm going to expand my General tab again, and let's see how close I am to actually matching. All right, in our North American database, again, what it's comparing is it starts with our balance on statement that we entered, physically what's on our statement, right? It adds any outstanding deposits, deposit in transit. It subtracts any outstanding checks, and I did have one, to come to an ending balance, right? This is what you learned in, you know, Accounting 101 when you were in school, right? It compares this to the ending general ledger balance to the GL account linked to this bank through our bank account posting group. And then it compares it for a difference. So there's a very tight integration to the GL in our North American approach versus the worldwide approach. And we can see that I have a $100 difference here, all right? And again, I'm going to say that we have $100 earned in interest that we have not yet posted, right? So we need to get that adjustment posted in order to have a zero difference. Again, we're not allowed to post a North American reconciliation if our difference is anything other than zero. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to expand my Adjustments tab. Now this is a very different approach than what we saw in our worldwide functionality. When we expand our Adjustments tab, this is literally our general journal on a tab. We're already there, all right? And we can see that it's already populated our posting date, a document number. This is based on the number series that's selected. Our bank account information is the account type and account number. It's given it a description. I'm going to change this just to be a little more accurate and called it interest earned. All right, and I'm going to say that we earned, yet again this month, another $100 in interest. Our balance account type defaults to GL account, and all I have to select is where I would like this to be posted. And again, just like we do every month, I'm going to post this to my interest on bank balances account. Now again, we may need to select some dimensions here, right, in order to get this to post correctly depending on your dimension requirements. But at this point in the North American functionality, I'm done. I don't have to transfer this to a general journal and post it and then come all the way back to my reconciliation to see it, all right? The North American approach is much more flexible. You can see here that immediately, if I refresh my screen, even though I have yet to post this to the general ledger, it takes it into account. It actually has a field here to look for positive and negative adjustments that are entered on my Adjustments tab, and it will take that into account to calculate the ending GL balance and the associated difference, which is now zero for me. Right? Now, if you want to, You can, if I go look at my Actions tab on my ribbon, I can record these adjustments. But when I work with users, I say why, right? Usually when you're reconciling an account, especially if it's large with a lot of activity, you know, it takes some trial and error to get to the point where you're reconciled. Why lock yourself into a posted adjustment before you have to, right? Because you may find that what you initially thought was the adjustment is incorrect. Just simply put it on your Adjustments tab. It will be taken into account as far as the reconciliation difference goes, and when we post this reconciliation, it will also automatically post anything on our Adjustments tab to our General Ledger. All right, so it provides us a lot of flexibility, and it's much less click intensive than what we saw in the worldwide functionality. All right, my difference is 0. Hooray, right? Good day. I have never reconciled a real bank account that quickly in my life, I don't think. Let's go ahead and look at the test report. All right, again, this is a huge difference between the two pieces of functionality. We get a lot of options on what will show on this test report. I'm going to go ahead and leave it all selected so you can see the full report. Let's go ahead and see if today, no, it's not letting me increase this. So we can see here that the report for the North American functionality is much different. All right, it gives us a reconciliation at the top of the report, right? It's just like we learned in school, right? It's comparing the general ledger balances, the ending GL balance, how it calculated that, to our statement balance, and again showing us what the difference is. If it's not 0, you will not be able to post. And then it gives us a summary of all the activity, what checks cleared, what adjustments we entered, and in this case, our outstanding checks. If we had any deposits in transit or outstanding deposits, there would also be a section here that you could choose to print showing that as well. All right, our difference is 0. Let's go ahead and post this reconciliation. All right, our statement successfully posted. I'll go ahead and go back to our nav window. And just like with the worldwide approach, we can always go back when using the North American approach and look at our past statements. So I'm going to go back to my bank account card. All right, I'll put my cursor on ABC Bank and go to my Navigate tab. If you're using the North American approach, your posted statements are available under this Posted Reconciliations option. All right, so statements is worldwide, reconciliations is North American. If I click on Posted Reconciliations, we can see here my July statement that we just reconciled. I can always go back and view this. All right, and we have a big, glorious, wonderful print button right here. All right, you can see that the window itself looks very almost exactly to what we worked with to actually process the reconciliation. It's just not editable, obviously, but we can also print it off at any time. We get the same exact options as to what detail to show. We can preview it, print it, send it to PDF, whatever is best for your situation. And you can see that it looks exactly like our test report, the reconciliation at the top, the activity at the bottom, including outstanding checks and any deposits in progress or in transit. All right, so we actually have gone through 2 reconciliations with the exact same amounts and transactions, one using the worldwide functionality, one using the North American functionality. So again, what is the correct solution or approach for your organization? Really only you can choose, right? There are some very powerful features in the worldwide approach, the import of bank statement data, the automatic matching or applying of the records between the bank statement data and your bank account ledger entries, right? On the other side, the reports don't really align to what a lot of people feel are North American requirements, right? Showing outstanding checks and deposits. North American functionality basically provides us the reporting that we need, right? Outstanding check and deposit listing. Adjustments are much easier to make. It's integrated to the GL in a way that we're really more used to, but we don't have the import feature or the automatic clearing feature. All right, and again, it is all controlled by that General Ledger Setup window, bank reconciliation with Automatch field. All right, so Suzanne, that was everything I had on the agenda. We can go ahead and open this up for Q&A.
And we do have a question, Trish. Thanks for the presentation. All right, so got a few questions here from the audience. I'm going to just read them off. And we have, I think, a few Canadians in the house today. So I had some questions about Canadian banks being supported in the bank data conversion service. Is there any way you can pull that up for us in the worldwide version?
Sure.
And I
I'll
don't know
do
if we'll be
my
able to see it very well, guys. But one in particular was City National Bank, I believe.
okay. This may be a question that I have to do a little research on and get
Okay.
back to the person that's asking it, but let's take a look, all right?
Yeah.
What I'm actually going to try is my country region code here for this particular bank account is US. I'm going to see if changing this to Canada. There's actually a couple different places in NAV that could be affecting this. I'll try this particular place first. All right. Oh, well, it helps if you edit, doesn't it?
And while you're doing that, just as a reminder, the setting that determines which method you'll be using, that is a global setting, right? Not by bank, correct?
That's correct. That bank reconciliation with Automatch feature, that is global, right? So you can't pick and choose one way for one bank and one way for another. It affects the entire company, all bank accounts in the company.
Okay.
All right, so let's see.
Actually, I guess Jacob corrected me that that City National Bank is a U.S. bank account, so maybe we can check for that one. And then, Jamie, I know you asked about supporting Canadian banks. I'm fairly certain there are. I just don't know which ones they are, so we'll get back to you via email on that question.
And there actually is a listing on MSDN, I believe, that lists all of the participating banks. Okay. Suzanne, I'll try and grab that, and then we can provide it to the person asking the question, right, so they can.
Yeah, actually, I'll make sure it goes out to everybody with the recording link. So thanks for that, Trish.
We do have Citibank US listed. So.
Okay. All right, and then Jean would like to know. Our mentions that our ACH and EFT payments show up in the deposit section of the bank rec as a negative amounts instead of in the check section. What are we doing wrong?
You're actually not doing anything wrong, and here is why. Those entries, the way you're processing them in your payment journal, are not creating check ledger entries, all right? So here I am in my bank account listing. You notice that I have a link to ledger entries, which are my bank account ledger entries. Everything I process against a bank account creates a bank account ledger entry. Deposit, check, adjustment, general journal entry, whatever it may be, all right? Not everything generates a check ledger entry, and you do have to have a check ledger entry for anything to show up in that checks tab of your bank account reconciliation. In order to generate a check ledger entry, I'm going to go ahead and open up our payment journal really quickly. If I can type today. There we go. All right, when you process a payment journal, in order to generate a check ledger entry, there's this, and I'll have to scroll over till we see it. There's this bank payment method field, all right, or bank payment type. You must have either computer check or manual check selected to generate a check ledger entry. Computer check, you will be forced to physically print something, whether it's on check stock or not, in order to process a bank payment type of computer check. Manual check, you can process and post the batch without physically printing. All right, so my guess is that when you're doing your ACHs and wires, you're leaving the bank payment type blank, which is our first selection here, and that's why you're not getting check ledger entries generated for the bank account, which is why you're not getting check entries on your bank account reconciliation.
All right, great. And I know we're almost at the top of the hour. I've got a couple of quick questions as reminders here. Please repeat how the bank recon with Automatch field is checked for new installs versus upgrades.
Okay, so according to the Microsoft literature, and I will say that again, according to the Microsoft literature, for a new database being installed, right, brand new database created, being installed, the bank reconciliation with Automatch field will not be check marked, meaning it will you will be using the worldwide approach. For a North American database that is being upgraded to NAV 2015 or 16, according to the literature, the field will be checkmarked, which means you will be using the North American approach. But again, if you're upgrading, put that on your list to go take a look at and make sure that field is selected in the way that supports the approach you'd like to use for reconciliation.
And then will you tell me again what the transaction date tolerance field does when clicking match automatically?
Sure. All right. So let's go back to a bank account reconciliation really quickly. All right, I'll just click New so we can get the window up to look at. Oh, and you know what? I'm going to have to go to General Ledger Setup really quickly because that is a worldwide feature, right? I don't have a statement in process, so I'm going to go ahead and check mark that field again. So now I'm going to use the worldwide. Let's go back to our bank account reconciliation. Let's click New just so we have it up in front of us. Okay, here we are back in our worldwide window, right? Excuse me, when you go to do the match automatically, and it asks for this transaction date tolerance in days, it will only match records between your bank account ledger entries and your imported bank statement lines where the transaction date and the posting date falls within the range of days you put here, right? So if I enter 5 as my transaction date tolerance days, for example, my posting date for this check number 1022 is July 31st. It will only apply a bank statement line with the date of July 26th through theoretically August 5th, right? So it's 5 days either way as far as I understand. If it falls outside of that period, it will not automatically match the two transactions.
All right, thanks so much, Trish. Trish, a lot of information there today. I want to thank everybody for their time today. Appreciate you staying on a few extra minutes here. We do appreciate your time. We'd like to get your input, feedback on this webinar, or interest that you have for us to cover in future Lunch and Learn webinars. Simply email your requests or your feedback to info@archerpoint.com. Again, it's info@archerpoint.com. With that, I would like to wish everyone a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.